So welcome back, everyone. If this is your first time clicking on my channel, my name's Hannah. I'm the founder of Journey to Well, and we are moving through a human design series right now. So this is our last human design energy type discussion. And in my opinion, we save the best for last. But we are talking about reflectors. Reflectors are a non-energy type, and I have my sister, which I feel like is such a gem. Reflectors are only 1% of the population, and you happen to be part of that 1%. And I love this conversation that we're gonna have because I know you so intimately. You're not like a friend of a friend that I don't really know. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. For those of you that are watching, I'm just gonna call it out because we're just gonna keep some of these laughs in. For those of you that are watching, Faith and I are just, when we get together, we have like the best time. And so we're just really silly right now. So if you see some cuts or it seems like one of us is just bursting out in laughter, we are. So we're just gonna go with it. But I'm really excited to have this conversation. Thank you for coming on. One of the other unique aspects of this conversation is that you've done a little bit of human design research yourself. You talked to Cynthia, who has been on this channel. She actually introduced the introduction to human design. I'll link it right here. But Cynthia's amazing. So you've had a conversation with her. You've kind of had your chart delved into. And I've talked to you about human design. But I would still say that you're very much a beginner. So I love this conversation because reflectors are, because they're 1% of the population, there's not a ton of conversation around them because there's just not a ton of reflectors. So I think this is gonna be fun. I'm really excited.
It's gonna be great.
Yay! Okay, so I wanted to open up the conversation with what have you learned about human design, your energy type, and maybe in contrast with the other energy types?
I would say that the thing that is most relatable and most useful for me that I learned is they say to wait the 21 days to make big decisions.
28, but
28
yes.
days.
A lunar cycle. So a lunar cycle
exactly.
is roughly 28 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I think that's relatable because I think in my younger years, and I've heard this, in my research, other reflectors say the same thing. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, you make the decisions and they're yeses when they should have been no's, or no's when they should have been yeses. Mm-hmm. And I definitely experienced that as a younger person, wanting to just make those decisions really quickly. Yeah. And it kind of got me in some sticky situations and I was like, oh, that was not what, I wanted to really do. Mm-hmm. So really knowing that and trying to, and then like you said, I'm still a beginner. So, kind of learning to meditate on that more and remind myself that it's okay and this is actually how I work best. Has been really great.
Which is crazy because so generators, for those of you that might not know, generators and manifesting generators make up 70% of the population. So like when we say we live in a generator world, that's why. And generators have that like yes, no. Like I am a manifesting generator and I'm also a sacral authority, which simply means in very simple terms that like I get an immediate yes or no when I'm presented with a situation or an opportunity. Reflectors do not have that immediate yes or no. And the really like nuanced part of that also is that reflectors pick up on the energy of the person that they're with. So let's say, for example, you're hanging out with me or another generator or manifesting generator. You might think that your yes is a yes, but it's actually the yes of the other person, not your yes. Definitely. Which is like, maybe that's too much, maybe that's not beginner. But that really fascinates me in terms of talking about reflectors. So let's dive into a little education around reflectors, and maybe you know all of this, maybe it's new information for you, but reflectors, why reflectors are reflectors, or what makes them a reflector in their chart, is that all of their energy centers, there's 9 energy centers in the human design chart, all of them are open or undefined, which looking at it visually, all of your centers are open. All of your centers are white.
Right.
Only reflectors have all open centers. That's what makes a reflector a reflector. So when we have a undefined or a white center in our chart, that means that it's like a little bit more, I put it in terms of mutable, and I always use this gesture, like I use body gestures to explain feelings. But it's because those centers tend to be a little bit more, what's the word? Like they can be affected by other people.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a defined center, I always think of like you're very stable, very secure. You can be a little bit stubborn in your defined centers. But open centers are really mutable. Like if you think of terms of astrology, you have mutable, fixed, and cardinal signs.
Mm-hmm.
Open signs, I always think of terms of, they're like mutable. They're mutable signs. So reflectors, reflectors are the only energy type out of the 5 energy types. All the other 4, they are their centers get lit up by the sun. And since you have no lit up centers, your centers are all defined by the moon. Yeah. So reflectors are the only energy type that actually is aligned with the moon energy versus like the sun and moon energy. Mm-hmm. Which is where the wait 28-day lunar cycle comes into play, which is really cool. With that, reflectors are called reflectors. I was having a really interesting conversation, and somebody was like, I always thought that reflectors are like really reflective, which kind of makes sense because they're called reflectors. Right. But one of the funnest ways that I can explain it is think of what reflects. A mirror reflects. Yeah. So reflectors are literally a mirror, because that they reflect, they mirror, like just like every relationship is a mirror, but reflectors are like enhanced. Yes. They're a lot more of that. So because you're a mirror, you have the ability to, reflectors tend to be very intuitive. Mm-hmm. The non-energy types tend to be very intuitive. So manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. You also tend to be, you can feel people's energy a lot more than any other energy type. Yes. And I was thinking about this conversation, and one thing that always kind of like rubbed me the wrong way that Mom said to me one time, she was like, Faith can really feel people's energy like no other. And I'm like, I can feel people's energy too. Like I can really, but our mom is a projector. Yes. So I want to get into that, but she only has 2 defined centers. Mm-hmm. So she's almost mostly undefined. And I have 5 defined centers, 5 or 6 defined centers. Yeah. So I think that the people that have less defined centers, they can feel energy. So like you again are just magnetized because you have no defined centers. Yeah. So that's really interesting about reflectors. I'm gonna pause and let you respond to that. Anything that I said that really like stuck out, or anything that you came to mind as I was chatting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was listening to a podcast that you sent me earlier. Yeah. About reflectors, and the piece relating to that really stuck out. She was saying she's a reflector, and she was saying that when she's with her husband or with someone else and they're experiencing this sort of feeling, it can be a 10% feeling for them. They're like, oh, I'm feeling sad. And then we come along, the reflectors come along, and we feel it like 40% magnetized. Like it's like so much more intense. And I completely related to that. Yeah. Like I'll come in and I'll be like, oh wow, like you're feeling, really sad about something. Like I just feel like you're sad. Are you like, you can be showing like no outward signs of something, and I'm like, but it feels so sad here right now. Like what's going on? Yeah.
I have a question about that. So I feel like when first of all, I most of the time I need to know that someone's upset. When my intimate relationships, like you, like if you call me, I know something's wrong. Right. But like random people, I don't get that feeling. Yeah. But I also tend to attach to the person's emotion and almost take it on as my own, which is something that I've been really working on, because working with clients in my coaching business, I'm like, this is not my energy and it needs to stay over there. Definitely. And I can walk with you through it. But my question is, do you feel like you have that sense of detachment? Like, I know that this is in my energy, but I'm really deeply feeling it. Or do you feel like you're attached to these emotions where like you leave that person and you're carrying that emotion still with you throughout the rest of the day?
Well, so I think it's kind of a two-sided question, because I feel like in my closer relationships, I do tend to like feel it more. But I don't know if that's more because like that's bringing in a different dynamic, right? Yeah. So like with you or with my fiance Casey, you know, I feel like I feel it more, and then I'm left with it, but I'm also interacting with you more consistently. Yeah. But while you were talking, I was thinking of like strangers that I've come in contact with, and I came in contact with this woman recently at the grocery store, and she was in front of me, and I decided, you know, she had a few things. I was like, I'm just gonna pay for her, you know, her few things. And she was like, oh my gosh, like that meant so much to me. Yeah. And it just like, it felt like she needed it. Like I knew, you know, and then she goes on to share that her mom passed away about 6 months ago. And this was right before Thanksgiving, and the holidays have been so hard because she's had to shut it out, you know, shut the door on her mother's apartment. Yeah. So, you know, she's trying to move on and move forward and everything, but it's been really difficult. Yeah. So the way I felt in it, very like, I felt I was there with her, and I'm like, let me give you a hug, like whatever. And then, you know, felt it a little bit after, I think in interactions with random people, like I really feel it, but I know it's not mine. Like it's very easy to kind of be separate from it. Yeah. In the sense of like, and I think that it's been learned too. I don't think I always knew that as a younger person. I think in getting to know myself better, it's like, okay, this is this person, what this person's going through. And then once I recharge myself, then I'm like, you know, fine. Like I know it's not like mine to be with. Yeah. So I would say, you know, kind of a little bit of both. Okay. But yeah. I love that. Yeah. I love that you brought up the recharge, because that was something else that I wanted to talk about. So this is a perfect segue. So reflectors and projectors, they do really well with rest. Or they need a little bit more rest. And I'm laughing to myself as I'm like listening to all these podcasts and having these conversations, because normally when I work with clients, and if they're a projector and I tell them this, because I've never worked with any reflectors, maybe someday I will, but and I tell them that they are a projector, and then I'm describing like projectors just need more rest. And a lot of times there's that like, I don't need rest. Like that like barrier kind of. And again, I think that it comes from conditioning, because we are conditioned to always be doing, and generators are the doers of the world. Right. And let me say first, like just a side note, if you are a generator or a manifesting generator watching this, we all need rest. So just because MGs and generators are like the doers and they have like all this crazy energy, doesn't mean that it's all the time. Okay. So like, that's just a side note, but projectors and reflectors do really well to separate themselves. Yes. And part of that is because projectors and reflectors have the most open centers. And so the open centers, like think of an empty cup. The cup is empty, so it's going to be filled with stuff. Right. If you have a full cup, it can't really be filled with stuff. So they need that time to like empty all the shit that their cups have been filled with and like wipe the slate clean. So I'm curious, because you are a mom, you have 2 kids, beautiful kids and busy kids. And you have a fiance that also have kids. It's a blended family. So like you're always doing, always going. And one of the things that
I have reflected on in knowing you is I'm like, Jesus, she always like,
Yeah.
you don't really remind me of generator energy because it's much different. It's much calmer. But your ability to go baffles me sometimes. And again, I think it's because you have the ability to like take on, like Casey, her fiance is a generator and I'm a manifesting generator. So like that energy, and your kids are manifesting generators.
Surrounded.
So you're surrounded by energy. So what do you do? Like, do you have little things that really help you out for maybe other reflectors or projectors that are watching this? And how much time do you personally feel like you need to like cleanse?
I think so for what I do, I think really being by myself.
Yeah.
Like completely by myself. Like I cannot be around anyone. That is so important to me. What I do in that time, I mean, I just sort of listen to what I need. You know, sometimes it can be something like very restorative, like a massage, you know, I've scheduled, or a bath, or, you know, maybe a meditation. Sometimes it can be something like I'm just, you know, sitting kind of scrolling on my phone or looking through pictures, something like, you know, kind of a pick me up. I have really positive things on like my feed and Instagram. So I can go to those sort of things, reading, drawing, you know, whatever. And then the length of time is, it's very, I think I've learned this about myself and who I am, is it can be, you can't be like, okay, once a week you need to charge for an hour. Like we're very like, it depends what we encounter.
Yeah.
So like I could be going to the grocery store. I go every Monday, I shop, you know, and then have that experience that I talked about earlier, which is like, I need more of a recharge than something where like I've kind of gone and there's been just a different feel and energies that I've interacted with. So I find that I really need to play it by ear and like listen to, okay, if I'm really like bing, 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 my body's saying like you are feeling exhausted, because it's like a really tired feeling. It's like, go take that time for yourself. And sometimes like that could be a day, that could be you know, 15 minutes, that could be an hour. It just really depends. I love that you're like, it depends on who I'm surrounding myself with, and that is so important. I mean, for everyone, right? Always be mindful of who you're surrounding yourself with, but again, with reflectors and projectors to some extent, who you choose to surround yourself with, like the whole idea, we had this conversation in the generator video, which I'll link right here. I believe it was that conversation, but generators do well, like the term is like, do what lights you up, because generators have that ability, like generators have a defined sacral center. So, and same with manifesting generators. I don't know if it's across the board, but mine definitely is. So we have that ability to like literally like create our own energy, just like pull it up from our sacral and then go do the fucking thing. But you don't have that. You have an undefined sacral center. However, if you're surrounding yourself with more generators or man-gens, which you really are, besides mom, in your immediate family, you take on their energy again. But it's different because you're taking on their energy and it's not your own energy. So having that mindfulness of being very careful of who you're surrounding yourself with and the energy of that person, because it does really permeate into you. I really want to take a moment here too to say definitely people, but location for me too. Like I was, you know, learned that, and like that really resonated for me. Like going to different places really like it helps. Like it can bring me more life, you know, like and I don't, you know, it's from, I think maybe sometimes from the people in the place, or sometimes from just the place itself, right? Like if you're like out in nature, or you know, coffee shop, it's just a higher energy. Like we're just, you know, there's different things. So I love going to different places again, that like listening to, and like if I need to recharge or whatever, like listening to that and being like, okay, like I need a coffee shop today, or I need, you know what I mean? I need like that nature by myself. Or I need, you know, something like that. Ooh, it really makes a difference. Or traveling somewhere new and kind of exploring, me like, ooh, this is like a fun over here.
Well, I was listening when I was learning about reflectors, the idea of like tasting a bunch of things came up. Like you go to an ice cream shop and you taste all the different ice creams. That's what reflectors need to do.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yes,
yes,
so I love that I love that you're saying that. Yeah. That's really fun, and that really pulls in with the self and not self theme, which I like to talk about in this beginner, because we're not going to go into like your lines and your gates and all of that, which is really important to look at in reflectors, but yourself. So like I always call that when you're living in alignment with your energy type. So your self is surprise, and then your not self is disappointment. So yourself, I love like when you try a bunch of things, right? Then you're like surprised, like the ice cream analogy, right? You're like, oh, I like this one, or oh, I'm surprised that I didn't like this one, even though I thought that I would. Cool.
Yeah. I definitely, that makes so much sense. That like brings me life, like going and trying, and because it can be different things, because the surprise of it, and it's not holding that expectation. The same podcast I was listening to earlier, she was saying like disappointment is the worst thing, and it is for me. Like, and she said that she was like, you know, I'd rather be sad than disappointed. I would rather be sad than disappointed. Like it's like you go in and then, you know, having that, it's like surprise is almost on the other side, right? Of like, you know, going in with no expectation and that surprise that brings like life, but then to go into something and you're either expecting it or you know and then you're let down is like that's not
interesting. So I remember when I learned myself and not self for manifesting generators, it's your not self is frustration. And when I learned that, there was like this whole light bulb moment where I was like, I literally used the word frustration. Like I say I'm so frustrated right now, and now I've learned that I'm like, okay, well then let's look at what's going on with the situation, because there's some aspect of that I'm not living in alignment. So with the disappointment, I'm curious if there's a reflection while you were listening to the podcast or having this conversation where you're like, I definitely just avoid, like, do you avoid situations because you're
as a parent,
you're afraid of?
I parent, like, you know, single mom for a while. And being with my now partner, just the realization more because he points it out more so for me, you know, you can get those from a partner. And my realization of I avoid disappointment. Like I'm like, oh, I have to change it to like this so they don't get because it's the worst for me, and I don't want to do that for them. Yeah. So I like try to avoid it at all costs, and I'm like, no, like this is part of life. Like this is something that has to be, you know, even though it's like yucky and it feels like the worst to me, you know, it might not be the worst, and might not be the worst for them, right? They are different people too. And I think it is like it was such a fear in my head, but even like kind of experimenting with being like, okay, they're gonna be disappointed, like it being okay. You know what I mean? Like I thought it would have been worse, or you know.
Well, and the not self or the not in alignment is really not a bad thing. It's simply a guidepost. It shows us that we're not living in alignment, and it gives us, it's really the invitation and the opportunity to then pivot or change directions. But of course we avoid the uncomfortable, and so that makes sense. But I love that example for you. I love that you brought that up. Man, I had another question. Oh, so the other thing that I want to talk about is I had this conversation in the projector video, which I will also link, but reflectors, again, amplified. Reflectors being a mirror, if you think about, like we've talked about it in the aspect of you, but now let's talk about it in the aspect of the mirror reflecting to the person that you're talking to. So you in regards to me. So reflectors, just like projectors, I think the non-energy types are like very wise. And I heard this analogy and I was like, oh, I love this. So reflectors, if you think in terms, like if you want to think about why only 1% of the population, if you think of terms of tribe, when we were living in tribe, we really only needed like 1 or maybe 2 of like the wise sages, or I don't even know what you want to call them, right? But like 1 or 2 people in the tribe that really had that like very deep, like maybe even like psychic ability, very in touch with nature and like what's going on in the world, and then where should we be going in the world. Projectors are literally described as like the guides of the world. Reflectors, I think of like that 1% deeper, that 1% like wiser almost. And it's not like, I don't know, that sounds a little bit egotistical or it sounds like manifesting generators and generators are not wise, which I'm not saying at all. But if you think in terms of tribe, like we only needed 1 or 2 of those people. So to me, I was having a conversation with Mom the other day, and she asked me, my mom is a projector and she is very wise. So she asked me, she's like, who do you feel the safest with in having conversations? Like in your like immediate, like what is your immediate response? And I'm like, Faith, my sister, and my best friend Alana. And I was reflecting on why I said that. And I was like, I wonder if it has to do with the fact that you're a reflector, which again does not dictate, because Alana is she's a generator. So it doesn't dictate like I always want to talk to projectors, but I think that there's this ability that reflectors hold of like just innate safety. And with that said, I think it's because you reflect like the safety that I hold within myself. So maybe you wouldn't, like if you don't feel safe, I don't even know if you would know this on like your inner journey unless you've done a lot of work, like the viewer. But yeah, like there's just this, I think that like with you, talking to you, I always feel this like non-judgment. I never feel judged. And I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that you're a reflector. I don't know. What is your response to that?
Well, it's hard because I'm not on the other side.
True.
I do know in experience, I feel like you're not the only person that has told me that before. Like just the non-judgmental sort of like, I just take it all in, but I also don't feel judgmental. I feel very much, that everyone's on their own journey. And everyone is where they're at. And like, that's just my feeling of people in the world. Like I have a deep love for people. And maybe it is because I have that understanding that like, that everyone is so different. And that's okay because everyone is so different. And maybe, you know, others are more competing or trying to get ahead of each other, or like I'm, you know, this certain spot, well, but they're here in this spot where I don't know, I've always felt sort of like that's okay though. Like everyone I just have this deep like knowing in my soul and in my being that like well, everyone's different. Everyone's where they're supposed to be. Everyone's learning and that's okay.
Yeah. I get the image with reflectors, like, you know, the like I'm not even going to describe this adequately enough, but like, you're like walking, you're like on this like big life quest, and you like walk into this tent in like India or something, and like they have all the incense burning, and it's this like old man like sitting in meditation, and you ask him this question, and like he answers, like if you've ever studied like Taoism, like the idea of the Tao is that like you can't ever like fully understand it, and to describe it, you're like muddling it. That's what I get with you. I don't know why, when you were just talking, I was like that's the imagery that's coming to mind, because it's like you have this like knowing, like this like, I don't know, that like nobody else can describe or know. I don't know. And again, it's not coming from an egotistical standpoint of like you know everything, because you don't. So, and even the idea of like I know nothing at all. Like somebody was describing reflectors as she was like, you are everyone and you are no one at the same time. And like that dichotomy is so indicative, I think, of reflectors.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I've heard people, you know, reflectors, because we're the 1%, and the, you know, they're special and they're fairies. And then I've heard other reflectors be like, we don't want to be known as that. Like that's not, and that's very much how I felt too, especially when you first told me. I was like, no, that can't, no, that's not right. Like I can't be this. Like, no, I don't want to be this. That's a lot of pressure. Like you're putting so much pressure. And it's just learning, like that's okay. Like it's like the all but nothing. And you know, and that's well described.
I think what's funny is that when projectors, I've only worked with projectors, so I'll just speak with my clients, but when projectors find out they're projectors, they don't want to be projectors, because there's like, I think there's these stereotypes, like projectors are always tired, or they don't have the ability to like do anything because they need so much rest, or generators have all of this energy, and so you should have energy all the time. And it's like, once you dive into and like settle into human design a little bit more, then that initial barrier is like broken. It's like, oh, now I understand what you're saying. Like, and that's why I love having these discussions, because I could explain a reflector, I could explain a manifesting generator, but when we add that humanistic, like, tell me an example, tell me your real life, then we're like, oh, that's what that means. Okay, I can relate in this way. Even though, like, I mean, we get into, you're talking about how everyone's so different. We're just talking about energy types here. We're not talking about your authority, which all reflectors have the same authority, but that's the only energy type. Everyone else has, like, you could have an emotional, sacral, spleen, what's the other one? Anyway, like there's so many different nuances to human design. And then if you want to get like very technical, you can get into the gates and all of that and the gifts. But yeah, I love this conversation. I want to close with two things. First of all, this is a side note, which I don't know that anyone has thought this watching Faith and I's conversation, but when we were younger, everyone said that you looked like Sandra Bullock. Yes. Do you know what I learned today?
What?
Sandra Bullock is a reflector. Isn't that crazy? When I heard that, I got goosebumps.
Wow.
I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, like, because this podcast, she was like sharing famous people that are reflectors, and the first one she said was Sandra Bullock. Crazy. So look at Sandra Bullock and learn a little bit more of reflectors, I guess. Okay, anything else that you really felt called to share, or that we didn't touch upon, that you want to share with regards to reflectors?
I can think of. Yeah. Okay. I think fun fact to end the
right? I know, it's like, let's just fun. Yeah, there's so much. I think that I would love to have another conversation with you about like reflectors just in the world and stuff, because there's so much like cool nuances about reflectors, I feel like. But this has been a video, so we're gonna cut it off. Thank you so much. If you all have any questions about reflectors, please drop them in the comments below, because I will chat with you again, so we can answer the reflector questions. Or if you know anyone, if you are a reflector, of course, everyone says this in their podcast because you never find reflectors.
Reach out.
But if you're a reflector, reach out, because just like I was saying, like the nuances, like you are a 1-3 as your, man, I always forget the word. But fun fact, I'm also a 1-3, which I think is really weird. So I think that we have a lot of similarities between like the 1 line and the 3 line. The 1 line is like the investigator, so learning, like you're a lifelong learner, which I think really ties into reflectors and manifesting generators a lot. And then the 3 line is the like we learn by trial and error, by failing. And just a fun story, like when you were when we were kids, I remember you saying that to me. I don't know why I remember this so vividly, but you were like, I have to do it by myself. I have to do it to learn if this is like the right choice, or if this is what I want to do, something like that. You're like, I have to do it. You can't tell me. That is like quintessential 3 line. Is they have to, it's the experiment, it's the experimenter.
Good or bad.
So you have to learn, 3s have to learn, which is also just so fun for me. So anyway, that's like a side note on lines, on like if you're a 1 line or a 3 line, but a 3 line. But thank you so much for coming. This was so fun. I appreciate you.